Jaguars mandatory minicamp has officially concluded. And on today's episode of Jags Now, presented by Prize Picks, powered by Chat Sports, we're going to be discussing the biggest winners and the biggest losers, at least in my opinion, for Jacksonville as we now enter a different part of the offseason before we get to training camp. This is Jags Now. As I mentioned, I am your host, Cullen Brown. And let me know before we get going here, who is your biggest winner and biggest loser for the Jacksonville Jaguars during this mandatory mini camp period? I'm obviously going to give a list of guys. I'm going to do 3 winners and 3 losers, at least in my opinion, that are the biggest winners and losers. You guys let me know down in the comment section who you guys' biggest winners and losers are. We'll start off with, I don't know if this is really even a debate. I don't know if this is even a discussion. To me, the biggest winner is Brian Thomas Jr., who had a lot of discussion about Brian Thomas Jr. this offseason in terms of from the moment Liam Cohen and James Gladstone had their end-of-season press conference, they made it abundantly clear Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be a part of this team. He is an integral piece to the puzzle in terms of our passing attack, and we have a vision for him, and we believe in him. And Brian Thomas Jr. rewarded those comments with his performance so far through OTAs and mandatory minicamp. He's been on fire in terms of just all the reports from everyone who has boots on the ground during these media open availabilities, and it's truly a sight to see because BTJ did not have the greatest year last year. We talked about it. Is there any chance that he gets back to that 2024 form? Well, it's early, and you don't want to crown it before you see it on the field. But if all the reports coming out of mandatory minicamp are true, it looks like the old BTJ might be back. Liam Cohen, I thought, had a really interesting quote, about Brian Thomas Jr. in terms of the high level that he's been performing at. He was asked, plain and simply, this was on Wednesday. I'm filming this Thursday night. This should go out Friday. He was asked about Brian Thomas Jr. stacking good days. And he had this to say. I mean, you hear it's hard to not hear everything right until also for himself. I know there was standards in which he wanted to improve on. And so the fact that he's just come out here and worked his ass off, having a great attitude, like after every play communication with either myself or Trevor or EB or Grant, whatever it is, he continued. And then making the play like that is something that you cannot simulate in routes on air. Talking about the deep ball that Brian Thomas Jr. caught yesterday. You cannot simulate that type of confidence until you do it in practice. There's nobody that I've known as a player that can only turn it on in a game, like the whole gamer thing. Like I don't fully believe in that. I believe in guys elevating their play to go play in a game, absolutely. But the confidence of the connection and the chemistry that they're building, talking about Brian Thomas Jr. and Trevor Lawrence, that's real. That right there is pretty much everything that you would want to hear if you're a Jaguars fan and you want to believe in this Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas Jr. connection, which wasn't the greatest last year. Calling a spade. And BTJ, if he hits, and he hits on his potential, right, which you know it, right? You saw it with him as a rookie, the speed, the route running, the just explosive playmaking that once he gets the ball in his hands, like he is a threat to take the distance from any blade of grass on the field. And just every time I open my phone and I'm checking in with the beat reporters that the Jaguars have there in Jacksonville, it's just all of them are saying the same thing. Brian Thomas Jr., another great play. Brian Thomas Jr., really impressing. Brian Thomas Jr., raising the level that he set the previous day. And you just love to hear it because I'll just make this final kind of point for BTJ. If he gets back to that level that he was as a rookie in 2024, or dare I say higher, this Jaguars offense, the ceiling absolutely goes through the roof when you pair him next to Parker Washington, Jacoby Myers, the rest of the crew who, again, you could really give this award to the entire receiving core, but Brian Thomas Jr. especially, he's my biggest winner. These guys hit, and if he really takes that step forward, it's only going to be good things for the Jaguars. We'll continue with some more winners and some more losers on this episode of Jags Now, but I would not be able to do this episode of Jags Now without our wonderful friends over at Prize Picks. Today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. The playoffs are here for both basketball and hockey, which, by the way, those championship series, unbelievable. Baseball is underway, and it's time to cash in with Prize Picks. You also got the major soccer tournament that's going on. Prize Picks is America's #1 sports picks app, and is the best place to win cash while watching sports. Prize Picks is available in most states, including California, Texas, and Florida. And you guys can even follow me on the app to see all of my lineups at Cullen Brown 21. I had a hoops lineup that hit recently for Game 4, and I'm back at it for Game 5 on Saturday with a little 3-player lineup, $10 to win $40. I got Dylan Harper, more on his points, rebounds, and assists. He doesn't play like a rookie, folks. I think he's going to hit that pretty easily. He may even get some more run based on the way he's played. Jalen Brunson, give me the more on his 3-pointers, 1.5 makes. And then OG Anunoby, the star of Game 4, give me the more on 18.5 points. Like I mentioned, a $10 lineup to win 40 there. New user offer. Download the Prize Picks app today with a link in the comments and the description, and use code HMA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Let's go to HMA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It is good to be right. Shout out to Prize Picks for always holding it down here for us at Jags Now. And my second biggest winner through mandatory minicamp was the other part of the Brian Thomas Jr. Trevor Lawrence connection, and that was obviously the former #1 overall pick himself, franchise quarterback T-Law. And to me, having your best day as your final day, which was, the final day 3, Thursday, it will be yesterday for you guys. Trevor Lawrence was fully locked in, was accurate, was executing the offense, understanding protections in terms of what he needed to do against certain defensive looks, understanding certain concepts, just really was the total package. And Liam Cohen talked about, his kind of progression and how pleased he was this spring with just how T-Law has progressed as an offense. And we actually broke it down on a short, so make sure if you haven't already, check that out. But to me, Trevor Lawrence, right, really seemed to kind of kick things in gear the second half of the year after the Jacoby Myers trade, when Colvin Lanen kind of settled in on the offensive line, and they really started to build momentum all the way until their season ended against Buffalo. Finished top 5 in MVP voting. We've gone over the statistics and how well Trevor Lawrence played down the stretch. But Jaguars fans, for as great as Trevor Lawrence played, they know he can play better. And T-Law, I think, really has shown that throughout OTAs and minicamp, that there's another level that he can get to, which should only make Jaguars fans more excited to see him in action. It's the second go-around in Liam Cohen's offense. And I personally think that building that connection with Brian Thomas Jr. was important. I think Liam Cohen also realized that. But you also have his connection that he continued with Parker Washington. That seems to be going really well during camp. Jacoby Myers, right? Establishing that, security blanket in the offense. Brenton Strange, getting used to the running backs in terms of Bashal Tuten having an increased role. Quint Allen should have some third down reps as well. His offensive line getting more comfortable. And again, just really stepping into that next level that Jaguars fans and people who believed in Trevor Lawrence knew he could get to, based on just how Liam Cohen feels about Trevor Lawrence. And not only that, but, kind of how we similarly mentioned with BTJ earlier, they want to throw the ball down the field, and they want to really stretch out defenses in order to create opportunities underneath. Well, you're not going to be able to do that if you don't believe in the quarterback, being the architect that he is of the offense at the head of the helm. And I think Trevor Lawrence has given Liam Cohen that confidence to say, hey, we can evolve this offense a little bit and really try to get after NFL defenses. So he's my second biggest winner. I think the receiving core and Trevor Lawrence, there hasn't been enough good thing. There's been an unlimited, as I'm trying to figure out words here, there's been an unlimited just outpour of just positive comments and just reports about Trevor Lawrence and this passing attack and where they're potentially going for next season. And hopefully for Jaguars fans, it continues with how they ended 2025. So Trevor Lawrence is my second biggest winner. And then getting to my last winner here, I'll be honest, if you would have asked me after the season ended, Cullen, you're going to do a mandatory minicamp winners and losers. Just name the top 3 guys that you would project as biggest winners and biggest losers. Not knowing anything that happened, obviously, who would you pick? This last guy would not have been in my top 3, not in my top 5, not in my top 10, not in my top 25, and maybe not even in my top 50. And it's Jabbar Muhammad, the former undrafted free agent out of Oregon corner, who it just seems like he is a guy that in these defensive drills against these receivers who have been lighting it up, he's gotten his fair share as well. And dare I say, as a guy who spent last season primarily on the practice squad, he's making a case that he could be potentially somebody that threatens, certain spots on the roster that may not have been thought of as a question going into OTAs and mandatory minicamp. I think if you're the Jaguars, you have 4 corners that I would be shocked if any of them didn't make the roster, right? Travis Hunter, who's going to have more of an uptick along with his offensive duties. You have Jarian Jones, you have Jordan Lewis, and then you obviously have Monteric Buster Brown, who you gave that contract extension to right before the start of free agency. So those 4 are locked. I would be shocked if any of those 4 did not make the team. Well, if you're the Jaguars, depending on how many you keep, maybe you keep 5 corners, 6. I doubt they keep 7, but just for the sake of argument, that's like 1 to 2 to maybe 3 spots, and 3 is really stretching it. That you're fighting amongst the other cornerbacks. And to me, Jabbar Muhammad, at least so far, has made the case that he could be potentially the guy that they keep as that 5th corner, where he's 5'9", maybe 5'10". He's somewhere in that range. Can play both inside and outside, which that versatility Anthony Campanelli, I know, is a big fan of. That's only going to add to his value. And if he keeps this performance up throughout training camp, throughout preseason, this side or the other, do not be surprised if Jabbar Muhammad is on the Jaguars' 53-man roster. To me, I've been pleasantly surprised. I mean, it just seems like every day he continues to battle in these one-on-one drills. He continues to make plays, had multiple interceptions throughout OTAs and minicamp. And when you go through this OTA period, yes, obviously NFL beat reporters for whichever team they're covering, they're going to be more positive for their guys and everything in terms of they're not going to just blindly mistake everything. But, generally, they're going to say, hey, what's the positive stuff going around, right? This is stuff that you should be executing at a high level. That Jabbar Muhammad, the fact that he's gotten mentioned as much as he's gotten mentioned so far, to me is only a good thing for him. So credit to him, and he is my 3rd biggest winner, which, again, I can't believe I'm saying that, but here we are. All right, we've talked about the winners. Now we got to discuss the losers. To me, the number 1 biggest loser, we've kind of talked about it, and it should be no shock. I think it's Chris Rodriguez. And Rodriguez, it sucks for him because it's really not his fault. He obviously suffered the foot injury that Liam Cohen confirmed, had surgery during a earlier part of the offseason program, and he's expected to be ready for around the start of training camp. And it just sucks for Chris Rodriguez, who, whenever you join a new team from, free agency, a trade, whatever the case may be, you want to really establish yourself and get as many reps as you can in a new scheme, new offense, whatever the case may be. And for Rodriguez, yes, he has the history with Liam Cohen, but he really, I think, has a chance to be a big part of an offense that figures to be one of the better offenses in the NFL. And the fact that you're missing out on all these reps where Bashal Tutin, at least so far, looks good, looks explosive, looks like he's ready to take that next step in terms of handling that additional workload. I kind of made this comment earlier when talking about Rodriguez, if the projected snap share was probably going to be somewhere around maybe 50-50, 55-45, maybe 60-40 in favor of maybe Bashal Tutin to Chris Rodriguez, I think now, at least where we sit here right now, maybe that's closer to 65-70, just because Rodriguez hasn't been out there, really gaining those reps that you need. And, he obviously is the most experienced running back out of him, Tutin, and LaQuinn Allen, but you're still learning a whole new concept, new verbiage, new just everything. And he hasn't been out there. So to me, him missing that, he's the biggest loser, along with our second biggest loser, which I have is Cole Van Lanen. And Van Lanen, he got injured week 18 against the Tennessee Titans. knee injury. He shortly before that signed like a 3-year extension with Jacksonville. So it's not like his roster spot or anything's not guaranteed. But I think for Van Lanen, right, like the fact that he hasn't been able to been out there, you want him to really establish himself because I think he found a home in terms of that left tackle spot. I think he's only going to try to build off his performance last year where I've said it multiple times. I thought he was the best offensive lineman for Jacksonville last year with respect to Anton Harrison. And, you know, he played all those different positions. He was such a key role in getting that offensive line where it needed to be that I really hated for him that he hasn't been able to been out there. Now, in terms of like, is his position on the offensive line in danger? No. And Liam Cohen gave an update that he should be ready at some point during training camp, maybe a little later than Chris Rodriguez. So it's just something that you kind of have to keep in the back of your mind that, like, okay, how long is this going to last, right? Because we expect you to be the starting left tackle. Obviously, Walker Little's still on the roster. He could slide in at left tackle. Obviously, if you're a fan of Jacksonville, you don't necessarily love that. Do they potentially consider kicking Wyatt Milam out there? I prefer him more interior as a guard, but you have so much competition out there. Does it make sense if Van Lanen's injury kind of lingers? Like, does he potentially become somebody that competes with Walker Little at left tackle? I'm not really sure, but again, just not ideal for Cole Van Lanen. I'm not saying it's the end of the world that he hasn't been out there in terms of, hey, you know, the sky is falling, but just something to keep an eye on. So he, to me, is the second biggest loser. And then the third biggest loser is pretty much the entire quarterback room minus Trevor Lawrence. Nick Mullins, Carter Bradley, Joey Aguilar. Based on all reports, like there have just been multiple instances of just not being able to keep the operation going when Trevor Lawrence isn't out there. And no one was ever really looking at this room sitting there saying, oh, well, the Jaguars are set at, you know, they have really good quarterback depth, or, you know, they feel confident in their abilities to lead a long-term stretch if need be. But it just became more apparent that the Jaguars are not in the greatest position when it comes to quarterback depth. And knock on wood, if something were to happen, which I hope it doesn't, based on what we've heard, it doesn't seem like the Jaguars should feel comfortable in Nick Mullins, Bradley, or Aguilar really stepping in there and giving this offense the same level of production that you would for Trevor Lawrence. Not that they would ever give the same level of production, but like the gap in terms of, you know, if Trevor Lawrence is up here, I mean, the next line, whether it's Mullins or Bradley, is just not quite where it needs to be, which is a shame because, you know, obviously injuries suck. They happen in the NFL, and hopefully Trevor Lawrence, again, I'm knocking on wood here. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but just on all the reports, apparently it's been a struggle for the second and third team units to kind of keep the offense at the level that Trevor Lawrence is getting, which, again, that shouldn't be the expectation, but there should be some level of competency where it's like, okay, you know, second team unit, they're hitting their stuff, they're operating at a decent level, and we just haven't gotten that yet. So those are my three biggest winners and losers from Jaguars mandatory minicamp. You guys, again, let me know who your biggest winner and biggest loser is. And if I missed somebody, please let me know down in the comments section. Also, don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed the content and subscribe for daily Jaguars coverage, which, by the way, and I should have mentioned this off the top, we're around 50-ish subscribers away from 3,000 subscribers. If you guys made it to the end of the video, that means we did something right. And if you could hit that subscribe button, it's completely free, doesn't cost you a dime. We've got you covered. Jaguars content, 365 days a year, whether it's mini camp, whether it's training camp, whether it's OTAs, whether it's free agency, the draft, regular season, preseason, whatever the case may be, all things Jaguars, we will have you covered here on the channel. Please consider hitting that subscribe button if you made it to the end of this video. As always, Jags fans, keep it real and peace out.